3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running.
There is no other institution that has the ability, uniquely,
without a heritage, every generation starts over.
Ask not
to remind the current regime
what your country...
We, the people, tell the government what it is allowed to do.
to get back in their box and stay there.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
From the Heritage Foundation, this is Heritage Explains.
Anyone who has worked construction can tell you it's a dangerous business. From working at heights, to powerful tools, to hazardous materials, the people who build skyscrapers, stadiums, and roadways have many dangers to contend with. In 2023, construction was the most dangerous of job sectors in the U.S., with just over 1,000 people losing their lives in the workplace. That number used to be even more dire, as in decades and centuries past, loss of life during major construction projects was pretty much expected. The construction of the Hoover Dam in the 1930s, for example, led to the deaths of 96 men. And so it was when construction began on San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge in 1933. Chief Engineer Joseph Strauss, despite attempting to build the longest and tallest suspension bridge in the world at the time, put a premium on safety. He mandated the use of innovations like hard hats and safety lines, but also of a movable safety net designed to be placed under working men. Between 1933 and the completion of the bridge in 1937, 19 men had fallen from the bridge and been caught by the net. In 1965, the Johnson administration signed into law a similar social safety net. The programs we now know as Medicare and Medicaid. They were designed to provide health care to Americans who were particularly in need. But over the years, the programs have expanded hugely, and focus has shifted away from people who really need assistance to much larger groups. This can be a real problem for the people that Medicare and Medicaid were originally designed to be a safety net for. Here to explain why, and to talk about the recent reforms to Medicare and Medicaid, is Nina Schaefer, Senior Research Fellow at the DeVos Center for Human Flourishing, here at the Heritage Foundation. Nina Schaefer, welcome to Heritage Explains.
Thanks for having me.
So this is your first time on our show. So can you tell us who you are and what you do at the Heritage Foundation?
Sure. My name is Nina Ochorenko Schaefer, and I work on healthcare policy here at Heritage. I've been at Heritage since 2001, working in the healthcare area, and took 1 year off to go work in the first Trump administration and then came back to Heritage again to continue my work in research here.
What got you started on healthcare? Why study that?
Oh, interesting. So when I came to Washington straight out of college, I was one of the last hires. Everything done on Capitol Hill is done through seniority. And when I was working for my state senator, they handed out issues. And of course, by the time they got to me, there were only 5 issues left. It was Medicare, Social Security, postal issues, and Indian affairs. And so I thought I need to figure out something for my future here. And so I chose Medicare and Social Security. And that's kind of what got me started on this healthcare journey.
Excellent. Well, so can you tell us a little bit about that? So for folks who may not be familiar, can you kind of lay out, when we talk about Medicaid, we talk about Medicare, what is the difference? Define these terms for us.
Sure, great. Well, both of them are government programs that were created in 1965, so been around for quite a long time. Most people know of the Medicare program. That's the program that covers people over the age of 65. When people hit retirement, they usually join the Medicare program. The Medicaid program is kind of the lesser known of the two programs, and it's a welfare program for low-income individuals. When it was first created, it was very targeted. It wasn't for everyone. The policymakers decided, let's find kind of the most vulnerable and start with that population. So the Medicaid program traditionally has covered people that are low-income pregnant women, low-income children, low-income elderly, and low-income those with disabilities.
We just had a reform of the Medicare and Medicaid systems that came through as part of the so-called Big Beautiful Bill a couple of weeks ago. Can you talk about those changes?
Sure. Well, let me start by saying that one of the things about Medicaid that makes it very unique is that it's not just a federally run program. It's a federal-state partnership, which creates all sorts of interesting dynamics when you make changes to the program. So in the One Big Beautiful Bill, there were a number of policy changes that were focused on the Medicaid program. I would kind of bucket them into three areas. One, on enrollment and making sure that only those people who are eligible for the program are enrolled in the program. So over time, people have joined the Medicaid program. States don't really check to see if the people are eligible anymore, and they just kind of create this kind of nonstop enrollment in the Medicaid program. That was made worse, actually, under the Biden administration, whose entire kind of focus in the Medicaid program was get people on and leave them on into perpetuity. So this bill really kind of focused on enrollment and trying to say, let's make sure that we're actually enforcing the rules that are on the books and making sure that we're protecting the program for those that actually are eligible for the program, and we're not using resources to provide care and services to people who are not eligible. And that not only includes not only American residents, maybe people that have higher incomes that aren't eligible for Medicaid any longer, but also illegal immigrants that have joined the program over time. So the bill really did took a number of steps to really tighten those kind of guardrails on what people can and cannot be eligible for in the Medicaid program. A good example I would like to always point out is asking the states to actually check every 6 months to see whether people who are eligible have died, and making sure that we're cleaning out the rolls of people who are deceased so that we're not sending money to the states for someone that doesn't even exist.
One of the things that came up a lot in this conversation was how various states have taken advantage of the Medicaid program. Can you talk about exactly what that means?
Sure. So because, again, with the unique design of the program, the federal government provides a share of the cost to the states, and then the states pick up the other share. So if someone is eligible for Medicaid, they go and get some sort of a procedure or services, the federal government will pick up part of the tab, and the states are responsible for the other part of the tab. This creates a lot of interesting dynamics because what we have seen over time is states trying to shift more of the cost to the federal side of the ledger and keeping their share of the cost lower. And they do this by using a variety of kind of accounting gimmicks where they work with the providers and say, look, we're going to tax you, the provider, and we're going to use that money to make up our share of the cost of the Medicaid program. In return, when we get those federal dollars, we will reimburse you for the taxes. So it's a lot of ways that the states are trying to find ways of leveraging their own costs, figuring out how to raise money for their own costs, the revenues on that side. But at the same time, it creates kind of an open-ended flow of funding from the federal government because there is no maximum amount. The more the state bills the federal government, the more the federal government gives back to the states. So a lot of what they did in the bill was really trying to tighten those guardrails and say, look, we got to put some limits on it. They didn't create anything new. They just said, we have existing rules on the books. Let's tighten those rules to make sure that we are trying to be as efficient and effective with the dollars that are going to the states, and that we're being transparent and kind of holding the states a little bit more accountable for how the money is going out. This is something that should be a win-win. I know there were a lot of providers in the states and a lot of states that are concerned about these changes. But honestly, this would be a win-win, not only if we can find ways of making sure that the funding is more effectively being targeted, the better off the program is going to be for federal taxpayers and state taxpayers alike.
One of the things that people found surprising that they may not have known when this conversation started is that it is possible for able-bodied young men to receive Medicaid. How is that true? And what does the bill do to address that?
Sure. There are a lot of pathways for individuals to get onto the Medicaid program. As I identified, there were, pathways if you're low-income pregnant women. States have a lot of flexibility to add different populations as they see fit to the Medicaid program. Many states did, targeted approaches for certain able-bodied individuals, maybe a parent of a child who's on Medicaid. States would open access for the Medicaid program that way. The big change happened under the Obamacare, under the Affordable Care Act, where they pretty much just said, no, we're going to get rid of kind of these pathways. And we're just going to say, if you're low income, it doesn't matter what your circumstances are, you will be eligible for the Medicaid program. So some states took that recommendation. They got a lot of extra money if they did it from the federal government. Again, another perverse incentive that the Medicaid program has created. And they expanded the pathways for able-bodied individuals. the big change that happened in this bill is to say, okay, we have a new category of people who might be on the program. Do we need to make sure that the program is designed in a way that best suits that group? Or are we creating new, instead of a one-size-fits-all, can we find a way of tailoring the Medicaid program that recognizes that this isn't a perhaps vulnerable group like a child or a disabled person, but they're able-bodied. They certainly have low income, but what can we do to make sure that the program is kind of working to help them out? And that's why they introduced this idea of a work requirement into the Medicaid program. So if you're an able-bodied adult on Medicaid, to qualify for Medicaid, you have to take some steps now. You have to either get a job, you have to start looking for a job, or you should get some training to get you a job. So again, going back to kind of how many liberals see the Medicaid program, they see it as kind of a catch-all for everyone. Get them on the government program and leave them on there for life. That's not really the approach that I think conservatives want to take with Medicaid. What we want to do is empower patients and empower the people who are in this program to have a better life. Whether that means if you're a disabled person, having services that you can use that help make you have a more fulfilling life. And for able-bodied in particular adults, it's saying, wow, you have low income. What can we do to make sure that you have a pathway out of poverty? That should be the ultimate goal of these programs, is really to help the beneficiaries have a better life. And so for able-bodied adults, that is a new part to the program that was added that I think will go a long way. It's not about penalizing people. It's actually about helping them achieve a greater purpose in life and to have the benefits of what work and moving out of poverty will give to them. And this isn't new. We have work requirements in other welfare programs. And so this is just now bringing the Medicaid program, which is a welfare program, kind of under the same umbrella that we have in other welfare programs that are a requirement there.
So you mentioned, of course, that folks who are more on the liberal side of the aisle would say that they want to see people on these programs for life. As the average taxpayer, the average citizen, that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. To us, that seems like it would be kind of a last resort to have somebody on these programs for life. What's kind of the end game there? What's the desire?
Sure. So I think many on the liberal side just want to say, we give you a card and you have health care. The government will take care of everything for you. You don't need to worry about anything. It really is their kind of backdoor way of getting to a single payer kind of government-run health care for all. And by using the Medicaid program as kind of this catch-all, rather than what it should be, which is a safety net, really distorts the whole purpose of the program. As conservatives, my view is that we should be looking at finding ways of making the program work better for those who truly need it, rather than just adding more people to the program. It's very interesting how liberals kind of frame the Medicaid program. They frame success of Medicaid is the increase or the number of people on the program. That to them is seen as a win. Wow, we have 90 million Americans on the program. As a conservative and a compassionate conservative, I look at that and say, wow, we have 90 million Americans who are in a crisis that they need a safety net program. We need to take a better look at how the system overall is operating. And I think that's one thing about the One Big Beautiful Bill in context of putting Medicaid in that is if we can revitalize the economy, if we can make growth happen in the economy, then the need and the demand for these safety nets will begin to get smaller, and then we will be able to really begin to target what we can do in the Medicaid program to make sure that those who are on it are getting the best care they can get. The way the liberals have it is we'll just add more and more people onto the program. It's like adding more people onto the Titanic. Eventually, that boat is going to sink. People already are on waiting lists for care and services that are already on Medicaid. And what liberals want to do is just say, well, we'll add more people on and ignore the actual administration of the program and how people are actually not getting the best care that they could be getting if we could just keep it focused and narrowly addressing the needs of those who really need a safety net.
So obviously there was a lot in the Big Beautiful Bill on Medicaid and Medicare, but there's more that we'd like to see happen. Can you talk about that? What would we like to see happen in the future?
Sure. So a couple things, made it, kind of hit the cutting room floor, but we think there are a lot of opportunities. This is really kind of just the tip of the spear. what was done. I thought it brought great attention to what needs to happen in the Medicaid program. But as you said, there's a lot more that could be done. I think one of the biggest thing is some of the incentives, the perverse incentives that Obamacare created in the Medicaid program of adding those able-bodied adults to Medicaid. As I mentioned, they get a significant federal contribution. So instead of, let's say, in California, you get 50% federal match rate, for this population, the federal government picks up 90% of the costs for that group. That creates all sorts of perverse incentive and distortions. It actually creates the incentive for a state to seek out those individuals and enroll able-bodied people over perhaps individuals who are eligible but not enrolled, like a disabled person, because they don't get the same funding for that group. We need a more efficient and equitable system for funding these populations, and I think that's something that really needs to get addressed, that we need to dial down the financial incentive for one population over another. And at least then we're making, states will be making decisions based on kind of a fair and level playing field. That's not what we have today. And I think really long term, it's really time to kind of do a kind of reevaluation of the Medicaid program from top to bottom. As I mentioned at the beginning, this program's been around since 1965. Rarely do we see, like other government programs, where you have to do a reauthorization, where you do a real thorough top-down review. What's working, what's not? Do we need to change something? Do we not? Medicaid has pretty much been running on autopilot since then. I think the special interest groups really like that approach to things. They kind of know what the system is, and they can just press go and don't have to think about how to make improvements to the program. And so I think a new evaluation of the program, looking at how much it has changed since 1965, and having a serious conversation at the federal level and at the state level about what improvements could be made to how the program is run, so we can actually look at different populations in different ways and structure a program that will work for those specific needs. The needs of children are much different than the needs of a low-income elderly person, or, as we've talked about, an able-bodied adult. And so maybe some redesign of the program that targets it to the groups that are on the program that need it most, giving states the flexibility to design the program around those areas, I think is well worth the time and effort, and something that Congress and the states should be working together on.
Nina Schaefer, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thank you to Nina Schaefer for her contributions to today's episode. You can find more by Nina on healthcare, welfare, and other social issues at heritage.org. And thanks as always to you for listening to Heritage Explains. You can reach out to us with thoughts, questions, or suggestions at heritageexplains@heritage.org. Take care. We'll see you next week.
Heritage Explains is written and produced by Mark Ghani, Lauren Evans, and John Popp.